Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, November 14th, 2025. We've got some great stuff coming up in this episode, a lot of kind of offbeat news that I've picked up during the week. And also, I want to talk a little bit what's going to be about in Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, which is free for the month of November. So I think it would be cool if you checked it out and see the kind of things that I write in there when I write things in there. This week in Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, we've got a cool story about a funeral director who brought a Pittsburgh-themed casket to a Steelers game, and photos and incident kind of went viral. So we talked about that and some of the other things that he does as a funeral director. And of course, we have a blurb, I guess, another short story about one of our American Cemetery Excellence Award winners, one of the runners up, and that is in the upcoming Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. But we're going to get to some of the week's news right after this message from our friends and sponsors at Starmark.
Funeral service is more than a profession. It's a calling. Starmark understands the care, dignity, and efficiency you need to provide for the families you serve. That's why we specialize in sensible product solutions designed to meet your needs. If you're looking for sustainable, economical, and efficient container and casket solutions, Starmark is here to support you. Because presentation means everything, you deserve a partner you can trust. Starmark, the cremation solutions leader. Visit starmarkcp.com today and discover the difference.
So first up, I want to talk about American River College Funeral Services Education Program in California, which has expanded. It has moved into a new, fully functioning mortuary facility that includes an embalming room, chapel, and consultation offices. The new space allows students to receive hands-on training by partnering with the Sacramento County Coroner's Office to provide complete funeral services to impoverished families in the Sacramento area, covering everything from family arrangements to the memorial service itself. The comprehensive curriculum covers practical skills like embalming and reconstruction, as well as essential knowledge in state and federal law, anatomy, grief counseling, and multicultural studies. I think what's cool about this expansion is it's like the third or fourth story I've done recently. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, little surprise for you, I guess. I don't know if it's a surprise, but the long-promised podcast episode about PIMS will be out on the 24th, though. So that's next Monday. As I record this, it's the Monday after next. But there are more and more mortuary schools, I guess, that are expanding or that are changing to help make it easier for people to get their degrees and to help make the degrees more readily available once students graduate. So I have actually already reached out to American River College, and we're going to talk more about what they're doing there. And I'll have a feature for you probably early in 2026. But I wanted to give you the heads up that they have had this great expansion, new facility. There's if you care to check it out online, it's a beautiful facility, and I think they're rightfully proud of it. So link in the show notes. Got a couple stories here about Service Corporation International, and then we're going to kind of barrel through a bunch of cemetery and cremation related stories because that's what dominated the news this week. The first SCI story is good. The second one, less good. Service Corporation International Senior Vice President and Treasurer Alan Foley provided an update on the company's performance and future outlook during the UBS Global Healthcare Conference in November. We've really covered most of SCI's earnings report 2 weeks ago, I think now, as this comes out. But I do want to kind of hit a couple of notes that I didn't really hit in the coverage because they weren't salient to the coverage at the time. The first is that the average age of SCI's clientele is around 80 or 81 years old, and the first and the first baby boomers are expected to hit age 80 next year in 2026. But the sustained growth impact on funeral volume is not expected until the latter part of the decade. So that's closing in on 2030, which coincidentally is when the cremation rate is supposed to kind of start to tabletop out. Right now, the cremation mix shift is moderating, but it's expected to increase at a slower rate, and to eventually become about 75% of the cremation mix for SCI. And as a result, I guess it's also shifting its SCI direct business model from a trust to insurance products. And that's something that we covered, but I've talked to a couple of insurance folks, and I'm going to be doing some more insurance reporting in 2026 because there's a bunch of stuff going on, and it's just interesting, the different kind of instruments that are being compared and moved and sold, I guess, to the people. So there's a link to that whole story in the show notes. I just wanted to really just mention that they were at this conference, and that mostly they're looking at 2030 for when they start doing, I don't know, real baby boomer business. Is that the way to put it? I don't think that's the way to put it, but unfortunately that is the way I did put it. So link in the show notes. And now for the less positive SCI news. Elizabeth Patrick, who lives in England, is trying to reach an agreement with SCI after her father, World War II veteran Sergeant Gordon Patrick, was found to be missing from his gravesite. He was an RAF glider pilot, and he died in Winnipeg in 1973 and was buried at Green Acres Cemetery, but he did not get a headstone at the time. Patrick had the grave excavated in May, planning to relocate her father's remains to a military cemetery in Burlington, Ontario, where he'd be buried next to his grandson. However, the grave was found to be empty. So after they decided that they really couldn't find it, SCI decided to waive the $9,000 excavation cost, and that was pretty much all they were willing to do, and the argument kind of devolved from there. They have since told Patrick that finding the remains are unlikely and offered her $2,500 for damages and upset, and proposed paying for a custom headstone to be installed in one of SCI's cemeteries, not the cemetery next to the grandson, which is how this all started in the first place. SCI also says that they're not responsible because they claim the body was already gone when they got there, that the company that they bought the property from is actually the ones who are responsible. And so we'll keep an eye on this as it goes back and forth. That's an interesting proposition if you can claim that something that happened under the previous owners is not your fault, even though it's discovered under your watch. It's an interesting proposition, and it's something that we'll probably try to take a look at. Again, not until 2026. Check out the link in the show notes. The Humboldt County, California Planning Commission unanimously approved a conditional use permit for Sacred Groves Conservation Green Burial Cemetery. That's a mouthful. It is a nonprofit project that is expected to cover about 47 acres. And this living sanctuary is going to be focused on the core principles of green burial. That means there will be no embalming, there will be only biodegradable materials allowed, and no concrete vaults or plastic liners in the graves. It's weird to call anything a traditional conservation cemetery because they're new enough-ish that to talk of them about being traditional makes a little bit of sense, but it's a conservation cemetery. We all know what these are. I think it's interesting that a municipality is the one that is doing the conservation. And we did a story this week. Yes, this week. In this week's Funeral Service Insider, you will see a story about another conservation cemetery in New York. And that conservation cemetery kind of came out of this. It's an environmental movement where the local land trusts find areas to protect, and I could easily imagine a future, and I mean, I think it's a practically a present, where conservation cemeteries and land conservation groups work together to use all of these land easements that they get as potential burial grounds, conservation burial grounds. It's happened several times, and I'm sure it will happen several more, but there's a link to this one in Humboldt County in the show notes. In Middletown, Connecticut, the State Veterans Cemetery, which contains about 16,000 veterans and their relatives, is nearing capacity, with in-ground cremation burials expected to fill up within the next couple years. Veterans Affairs Deputy Commissioner John Carringer, I think, indicated that the cemetery plans to repurpose some of the current land and up to 1,500 buried cremains plots as a temporary measure. This expansion is intended to buy time while the state searches for suitable permanent alternatives. I hope if you're a columbarium or a niche salesman and you're listening to this show, I think that should be your first call on Monday morning. I don't know why that wasn't mentioned in the story as an option. I don't know why it isn't an option. They must know that going up is the new going out when it comes to places to have cremated remains memorialized, and this is another one of those kind of increasing awarenesses that I'm seeing across these stories. Our friends at American Cemetery and Cremation Magazine have done stories about, going up. And I think it makes perfect sense to start thinking about how we can, make better use of the land above a cemetery for these cremated remains, because I think that is probably what they're going to start to look like in the near future. So anyway, link to that story in the show notes. Another municipal cemetery news article this week from Nelson, British Columbia, where that municipal cemetery is looking to raise its prices ahead of adding more green burials. On the city council on November 4th heard the testimony of an architectural landscape firm, Lee and Associates, and they recommended a substantial fee increases for the cemetery, which has a current average operating loss of $175,000 a year. The cemetery has not raised its rates since 2008, and we've done a couple stories about making sure not only that you take a look at your rates, but one of the great things that I read this year in American Cemetery was, before you raise the rates, put up a big sign saying rates go up on January 1st, and that has been effective for lots of cemeteries around the country, including these cemeteries, or hopefully, I guess, the cemetery in Nelson. They'll be able to follow that advice. A single casket lot would go up 171%, and this is from $387 to $1,050, which still seems really inexpensive. I do not know if those are Canadian dollars. My guess is that they are, but in American dollars, it costs $1,500 to buy a plot in Delmar, Maryland, which is not prime real estate, I can assure you. The cremation lots would increase 393% from $100 to $500. The information sparked a discussion about whether the town should have creme burial and whether the cemetery should be subsidized as an essential service, or if the revenue should be expected to cover expenses. All of these things will continue to be discussed. Of course, there were some other proposals. The architectural firm suggested adding a Columbaria garden, and suggested offering green burials and a trail of memories, which is a path featuring memorial walls and a wind phone for communicating with deceased loved ones. Wind phones are things we've talked about before. I love this memorial walls path idea, though. I think that's something that, again, as people try to figure out not only how to make cemeteries or keep cemeteries relevant or make them relevant, depending upon how relevant they are to you, but also find more ways to use the space that they have more wisely. This seems like a stroke of genius. So anyway, link to that in the show notes. And as always, I like to include a NIMBY story whenever I can because it keeps me young, I guess. The board in Fayetteville, which is in Lincoln County, Tennessee, has scheduled a public hearing to rezone a property from residential to commercial, and that would allow Gallant Funeral Home to construct a 1,200 square foot crematory on the property that abuts the existing commercial parcels. So this is the first property in a residential zone that backs up to a commercial zone, and because it is the 21st century and they are a funeral home that is able to, they have decided to add a crematory, and the planning director of the town said that the small building housing the crematory, and this is in quotes, won't scream that it is what it is. But that doesn't matter. Their word has gotten out, and the angry neighbors have started to mobilize. So we will see next month if there's any reporting from Fayetteville in Lincoln County, Tennessee. And if there is, I will share it with you on In Case You Missed It. And that will do me for this time. In Case You Missed It by Kates-Boylston is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited and videoed by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. And make sure you reach out to me if you have anything to say. As I said, I often share these stories on LinkedIn, if LinkedIn is a place where you are. I also have started using Dig. I'm one of 30 people on Dig, which has been revived. But if you are on Dig, you should find me there. I put all my funeral news there as well, as a way of kind of boosting these stories that I think is important. And that will do it for this week. We will check in with you next time. Have a great weekend.